Have you ever tried to binge your favourite show while abroad, only to find that it's not available in your current location, or worse, worried about using public Wi-Fi at your favourite cafe? Well, that's where Surfshark enters the picture today. It is the ultimate solution to problems when you're travelling, whether you want more Netflix shows by hopping over to another country, or just protecting yourself and staying safe online. You can easily change your virtual location with Surfshark with just a tap. Plus, they've got 3,200 servers in 100 countries, so no matter where you are, you can always find a server that fits your needs. Also, of course, they protect you if you're on unsecured public Wi-Fi. They've got top-grade encryption, meaning all of your data is safe and secure. You can send and receive information without a worry. Plus, you can save money online shopping, like sometimes flights more expensive. When you go back to the website, fire up Surfshark, then go back to the website, and you'll find that the prices are as cheap as you originally wanted them. They don't jack up the prices because they know you really wanted them. It's Surfshark, saving you money. One subscription covers unlimited devices. It's super easy to use, and they've got a 30-day money-back guarantee, so no risk in trying it out. So go to surfshark.deals/ITS and use the promo code ITS for 4 months extra. Thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring, and now back to today's episode. In the sweltering heat of July 1974, Huntsville Prison in Texas became the scene of one of the longest hostage situations in US history. For 11 harrowing days, the prison descended into chaos as 3 desperate inmates, Fred Carrasco, Ignacio Cuevas, and Rudy Dominguez, armed and determined, took control of the prison library, holding 16 hostages, including prison staff and educators. The intensity of the standoff gripped the nation, but also highlighted critical flaws in the prison system, leading to significant changes in security protocols, crisis management. The combination of a tough prison environment, stringent yet far from comprehensive security measures, and a diverse inmate population made Huntsville Prison a microcosm of the broader challenges facing the US penal system. As the days crept by with no peaceful resolution, the tension inside the prison reached fever pitch. The siege ended in bloodshed and death on the 3rd of August, bringing to an end 11 traumatic days that shook Huntsville Prison to its foundations. Huntsville Prison, officially known as the Huntsville Unit, is one of Texas's oldest and most significant correctional facilities. Established in 1849, the prison has played a central role in the state's penal system, housing some of Texas's most notorious criminals. By the 1970s, Huntsville had a reputation for its high security measures and its role as the central hub for executions in Texas, although no death sentences had been carried out since 1964. Over the last 40 years, it has been the most active execution chamber in the United States, with 587 people put to death between 1982 and 2024. Before the hostage situation, Huntsville Prison operated under stringent security protocols designed to manage its large and often volatile inmate population. The prison's infrastructure included multiple security checkpoints, high walls, and armed guards, all aimed at maintaining order and preventing escapes. Despite these measures, the prison was not immune to the challenges of managing a diverse and sometimes dangerous inmate population. In the 1970s, Huntsville Prison housed a mix of inmates, from those serving short sentences for minor offenses to hardened criminals with lengthy sentences for violent crimes. The prison environment was often tense, with overcrowding and limited resources contributing to the challenges faced by both inmates and staff. Conditions within the prison were harsh, with strict discipline enforced to maintain control over the inmate population. Leading up to the hostage situation, Huntsville Prison, like many correctional facilities of the time, struggled with issues of limited rehabilitation programs and high inmate-to-guard ratios. These conditions created an environment ripe for unrest, as inmates grappled with the harsh realities of prison life that set the stage for the dramatic events that would unfold in July 1974. The hostage crisis was orchestrated by 3 inmates: Fred Carrasco, Ignacio Cuevas, and Rudy Dominguez. Fred Carrasco was a prominent figure in the Mexican drug cartel world, known as El Señor, and he was one of the most feared drug lords in South Texas. He was reported to be the biggest and deadliest drug lord on the Texas-Mexico border, overseeing a cocaine and heroin empire that stretched from Guadalajara to San Diego, California, and Chicago, Illinois. Born in San Antonio, Texas in 1940, Carrasco slowly worked his way up the drug chain until he became one of the most feared names in the industry, with a litany of charges eventually leveled against him. His first conviction for murder came in 1958, but remarkably, he was paroled after just 2 years in prison. A second stretch for drug trafficking lasted 5 before he was again a free man. By the late 1960s, early 1970s, Carrasco had established a ferocious cartel known as the Dons, which began battling other gangs in Mexico. Fighting became so bad that the Mexican government ordered in the military and Carrasco fled north. He was arrested in Guadalajara in September 1972 after being found in possession of 213 pounds of heroin worth over $100 million, but he escaped from jail in Jalisco via a laundry truck after bribing officials. Back in the US, he was arrested again in July 1973 in San Antonio, surviving 4 gunshot wounds fired at him by police, and he was charged with the murder of a police officer from a past incident. He was also suspected of either directly murdering or ordering the murders of at least 47 people throughout his criminal career. Compared to Carrasco, we don't know much about the other 2 accomplices. Ignacio Cuevas had a criminal history marked by a series of violent crimes and was serving a 45-year sentence for murder at the time of his incarceration. Although not as notorious as Carrasco or Cuevas, Rudy Dominguez was a young and ambitious criminal serving time for armed robbery. His willingness to follow the lead of more experienced inmates like Carrasco and Cuevas made him a valuable asset in the planning and executing of their daring escape plan. The meticulous planning of the hostage situation began months before the actual event. Carrasco, with his extensive criminal experience, masterminded the entire operation. His plan was relatively simple: take hostages and negotiate their way out of the prison. His charisma and influence allowed him to recruit Cuevas and Dominguez, 2 men equally desperate to escape the confines of Huntsville. The critical component of their plan was the smuggling of weapons into the prison, with Carrasco using his connections both inside and outside to bring them in. 3 .357 Magnum pistols were smuggled in and a can of ham, while more than 300 rounds of ammunition found their way inside cases of peaches. While Huntsville certainly had its security features, inmates still received a degree of freedom that meant that they could move around the prison relatively easily. The plan hinged on the element of surprise and the perpetrator's ability to take control quickly and efficiently. And that is precisely what happened. The hostage situation at Huntsville prison began on a scorching summer day, the 24th of July 1974. The 3 men meticulously executed their plan to take control of the prison library, where several educators and staff members were present. The trio, armed with smuggled weapons, overpowered the guards and took 16 hostages, including librarians, prison employees, and 4 prisoners. The ease of the takeover shocked everybody at the prison. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the prison's emergency protocols were immediately activated. Law enforcement and tactical units were swiftly mobilized, surrounding the prison to contain the crisis and prevent any escape attempts. As the standoff began, negotiations between the inmates and authorities commenced. The primary negotiator was Captain Marvin Buck Berry of the Texas Department of Public Safety, who worked tirelessly to establish a dialogue with Carrasco and his accomplices. The demands of the hostage takers were straightforward, but challenging to meet. They wanted an armored car to transport them and their hostages to the airport, where they would be flown to safely, reportedly to Cuba. Additionally, they asked for tailored suits, dress shoes, toothpaste, cologne, walkie-talkies, and bulletproof helmets, all of which were delivered quickly. The conditions facing the hostages during this period were dire. Confined to the library, they were under constant threat from the armed inmates. Carrasco, Cuevas, and Dominguez made it clear that any attempt to storm the library would result in the immediate execution of the hostages. This ultimatum put immense pressure on law enforcement to find a peaceful resolution. Throughout the standoff, Carrasco used the hostages as human shields, positioning them near the windows to deter any potential sniper attempts. He also allowed some hostages to communicate with negotiators, a move aimed at showing their condition and leveraging their safety to pressure authorities. In the first few days, negotiations continued with little progress. Carrasco demanded that his escape vehicle be delivered promptly, but authorities were reluctant to meet his demand without ensuring the hostages' safety. By day 5, tensions had escalated as Carrasco began to lose patience. He threatened to start killing hostages if his demands were not met soon. Throughout the standoff, law enforcement employed a combination of negotiation and tactical planning. The negotiators' primary goal was to keep the situation from escalating further while exploring every possible avenue for a peaceful resolution. The tactical units, meanwhile, prepared for the worst-case scenario, developing multiple plans to storm the library if negotiations failed. Negotiators tried to convince Carrasco to release some hostages as a gesture of goodwill, but he refused. On day 9, Carrasco allowed medical supplies to be sent in for the hostages. This action provided some relief to the captives, but did little to advance the negotiations meaningfully. At this point, law enforcement's patience was wearing thin, and plans for a potential assault were finalized. However, the risk to the hostages remained a significant deterrent to any immediate action. During the final days of the standoff, it became clear that Carrasco was growing impatient and losing hope. His threats against the hostages became more severe, indicating a willingness to kill if his demands were not met soon. Negotiators held their nerve, continued to seek a peaceful resolution, but also prepared for the possibility that force might be necessary. An armored car was finally brought into the prison, with only a small amount of gas inside and parked a short distance from the library. For the hostage takers inside, it It was now or never. But the car sat agonizingly far from the library door. In response, they constructed what came to be known as the Trojan Horse, a structure of 4 blackboards grouped together with thick law books taped to the outside. Knowing that a vast phalanx of police officers and prison guards lay just outside, itching to end the crisis, Carrasco decided that the time had come for a showdown. 4 hostages were placed inside the Trojan Horse with Carrasco, Cuevas, and Dominguez, while the remaining 12 were instructed to act as human shields while rolling the structure down the ramp from the second-story entrance to the ground floor where the armored car was waiting. Outside, the authorities waited with guns and fire hoses trained on the library. The door inched open, and the Trojan Horse was slowly wheeled down the ramp by the clearly terrified hostages. As it reached the bottom, it got stuck. The exact information of what happened next and how it all played out remains a little hazy. Several high-powered water hoses blasted the Trojan Horse, attempting to topple it. They failed. In response, 2 of the hostages inside, Elizabeth Posada and Julia Stanley, were immediately executed. Once the firing began, those outside the Trojan Horse ran for cover as authorities managed to ram it with a ladder and finally topple it. A firefight erupted that lasted anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes, depending on your source. With all hope lost, Carrasco turned his magnum on himself and pulled the trigger. A hail of bullets hit Dominguez, killing him instantly, and a deathly silence descended. Initially, the authorities believed Cuevas had been killed also, but his wounds were only superficial and he was taken into custody. The 11-day standoff had come to an end. In the immediate aftermath of the resolution, law enforcement and prison authorities took swift action to secure the site and address any lingering threats. The scene was chaotic as medical teams attended to the injured hostages and officers. A news anchor said at the time, 2 hostages have been killed. It was a miracle more weren't. The physical and psychological impact on the hostages was profound. Many of them had sustained injuries, both minor and severe, during the initial takeover and the final assault. The psychological trauma was perhaps the most significant, though. The hostages had been under constant threat of death, living in fear of execution for 11 days, and this experience left lasting scars. In the days following their release, many hostages provided statements and reflections on their ordeal. Their accounts highlighted the intense fear and uncertainty that they had faced, but also the resilience and solidarity they'd developed while held captive. Cuevas was tried for the murder of Julia Stanley 3 separate times. To this day, it's not entirely clear whether he pulled the trigger, with his first 2 convictions quashed on appeal. His third, however, ruled him culpable under a law that holds all participants equally responsible. He was convicted of capital murder and executed in 1991 at Huntsville prison, just a short walk from the library, where his 2 accomplices held a reign of terror for 11 days in 1974. This hostage crisis exposed significant vulnerabilities in the US prison system, leading to widespread reforms aimed at preventing such incidents in the future. Both Texas and the broader national prison system underwent critical evaluations to identify and rectify the shortcomings that allowed such a dire situation to unfold. One of the most significant changes implemented was the enhancement of security measures within prisons. This included stricter control over access to weapons and contraband, as the ability of the inmates to smuggle guns and communication devices into the prison had been a key factor in this hostage crisis. Improved screening processes for visitors and staff were instituted to prevent future breaches. Additionally, there was a renewed focus on training and preparedness. Correctional officers received more comprehensive training in crisis management, negotiation, and tactical response. The Texas Department of Corrections, in particular, revamped its training programs to ensure that all personnel could effectively handle high-stakes situations. Policy shifts also emphasized the importance of inmate rehabilitation and mental health. Recognizing that overcrowded and under-resourced prisons contributed to inmates' desperation and volatility, reforms aimed to improve living conditions and provide better mental health services. Programs focusing on education, vocational training, and counseling were expanded to reduce recidivism and improve inmate behavior. The Huntsville prison siege remains one of the longest prison hostage situations in US history, and one of the few that ended as brutally as it did, with the civilian deaths. A dark 11 days in Texan history. A chaotic, bloody conclusion to a siege that led to a dramatic rethinking of prison policy across the country.